I guess we'll get started here. My name is Greg Kluszynski. I'm the chair of the City of Centennial Senior Commission, and want to welcome everyone. Thank you very much for coming, and welcome thank you panelists for coming. It's great. A little bit about first of all, could all of our senior commissioners please raise their hands? Thank you. So we have our whole group here. These guys have worked pretty hard the last couple of years trying to figure out the issues and go and work on the seniors' behalf. The Senior Commission is typically a group of citizens and also business people and some local government people that we work on issues and also on advocating for older adults in our city. So we've been doing this since about 2011, I guess it's been. Yeah, it's been 2011. We report to the city council, and we work with the staff on issues that pertain again to older adults in our community. One of the things that we'll be working on here real soon, come the first of the year, is a survey that's going to go out, be mailed out to older adults in Centennial about their experience living in Centennial and what they think. The other is going to be the boomer bond. No, not a bond like money, but that's just what they call it through Dr. Cog. And it's an assessment of the different services for our what services that are out there for the seniors here in Centennial. And we'll be, as a commission, we'll be asking this questionnaire. We'll be dealing with staff members of the city, the county, businesses, and trying to find out what types of services are available for seniors, and then gather that data so that we can present it to the city council in the future so that they can have some sort of a path to be able to do planning in the future. I guess at this point, what I'd like to do is introduce Angela Engel, our coordinator, senior commission coordinator, and youth commission coordinator. She'll be moderating today's. Now you guys play nice too up here. Okay. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to have our panelists today. We've tried to get a wide variety of perspectives to really help better understand the issue of housing as it relates to seniors. And a couple of items of housekeeping. Wait, this is not like the sound. How's that? Is that better? Can you hear me in the back? Okay, terrific. So restrooms are here to my right. And we've got water and coffee and cookies in the back. We hope to be wrapped up here at about 4:30 with the panel. And so if you have further questions, you're welcome to connect with the panelists on a one-on-one basis there. The agenda is that we're going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves, talk a little about their background and what organizations they represent. And then we'll have 3 moderated questions. After those 3 moderated questions, the audience will be invited to ask their questions. You have note cards on your seat. If you're missing a pen, I've got some extra over here at this round table in that cup. And we've got 2 folks, Tom Pryor, if you'll stand up, and then also our chair, Greg Kluszynski. And if you'll just pass your note cards to him, to either one of them, they'll hand them up to me and we can continue with the Q&A at the end. What I'd like to do is first just briefly recognize Linda. She is a senior from the community. She was gracious enough to come and share her personal story. I had to look long and hard because this is personal. Your home is very personal to people, and for a lot of people it's difficult to share that story. We have Missy Griggs. She is from Dr. Cog, and she actually supervises the intake.
Care management program.
Thank you. And then we have Chris Schaffner, and he's with South Metro Housing Options, and he's the new executive director for the program. So welcome, Chris. Jeff Martinez is the president of Brothers Redevelopment. We have a good relationship with Brothers Redevelopment. This past summer, the Senior Commission and the Youth Commission partnered to paint the house of a senior in Centennial. Very challenging situation, recovering from cancer and unable to maintain his home. So the Senior Commission, we got our t-shirts on and went and painted. It's quite the sight. There are pictures on the website. Also, I want to welcome Pat Coyle. He's here from DOLA and the Housing Division of DOLA. So they'll each take a couple of minutes and introduce themselves. Pat, if it's okay, we'll start with you.
See if this mic picks me up if I stand up, hopefully. Actually, it's not even on. Is this fine?
Okay.
So, let me phrase a little background. I've been doing housing for quite some time. And what my background is less important than what this topic. So why don't we just jump into that? If you have questions about what I do. I'm the Director of Housing for the state of Colorado. So it's a simple way. So in my household, there's a question my wife keeps asking me that I ask you, and you may be asking yourselves this question. Where are our children going to live? How are they going to afford housing? Where are our parents going to live? And can they afford housing? The first question is an older question about kids as they grow up. How can they afford? And ever since, the late 50s, early 60s, things were kind of in lockstep with housing costs and income, housing costs and wages. Inflation has taken hold, and you all know the story. Layer on top of that, then what we've done on the medical side, on our health side, and our lifespan has certainly expanded. And so there's this question looming that, again, outside of what I do for work, I get home every day. So you're the Director of Housing, what are we going to do? Well, let me think about it. First thing we did, so we built a house 5 years ago. And I'm sure in Centennial, in all of your neighborhoods, and throughout the metro area, and almost throughout the country, if you look, what the cities have done is they went out and they put a curb cut in your sidewalk. What did they do that for? Let me ask the next question. How many people have a step at their front door? Everybody. You have a step to get in your house. Isn't there a disconnect somewhere along the road? So when we built our house, there's no step in the front door. It comes up from the sidewalk, on a serpentine sidewalk, because it gives you a little ability to travel a little further into the front door. My wife and I can continue living there because we also have a little wider door in our bathroom. And we have a bathroom on the first floor. And we have a bedroom. And it was very thought through, and so I ask you, does it really cost that much more to give that thought? Because that's where we're going, and that's what our need is. It's not a big cost. So the second question is when, from the state's perspective, and I'll kind of wrap things up into this challenge. So we have about 35,000 households who are over 65, who earn less than $20,000, who pay more than 50% of their income to rent. So when you look at that, what's left? The challenge when we look at the marketplace is how do we afford to build housing to address that increasing demand? Not going to go away, it's going to increase. Because in 2020, the state of Colorado, the rate at which we are aging is going to almost double the national average. Because we have this, so you're looking at the problem, and we are aging quickly, my age group, and there's a lot of us. So it's a matter of supply, it's a matter of cost, it's a matter of income. And that ultimately is going to be the challenge. The challenge then also is, as we will talk through this afternoon, connecting the home with support services as we age. And that is something that we are beginning to learn a whole lot about. Dr. Cog, housing authorities, and nonprofits, we're working very closely together at understanding and trying to communicate to everyone that stable housing is as important as your nutrition. It really provides safety, security, a place to thrive, and has a great impact on one's health. So kind of frame the question for this afternoon in this context.
That's a great overview. Pat always does a great job of giving us the 30,000-foot level of what we're looking at. My name's Jeff Martinez. I'm with Brothers Redevelopment, so I'll discuss with you or share with you a little bit how nonprofits like Brothers are ideally or hopefully helping to address the situation that Pat set up for us in communities like Centennial across Colorado. Brothers is a long-established nonprofit. We've been around since 1971. We provide affordable housing, housing-related services for primarily senior and disabled folks across our region, also some low-income families or working-class families across the region. And what we really like to do is zero in helping folks address some of those issues that Pat mentioned, talking about how we help our seniors age in place affordably, independently, and safely for longer, because we know all the studies show that folks do better when they're at home. They don't do better when they're in the hospital, in a nursing home, and an assisted living home. They do better where they're comfortable, where they're familiar, and where they have that support system that Pat mentioned. It's so important. We're really privileged and honored to be able to work here in Centennial. We were approved to administer grants of up to $5,000 for seniors who qualify, income qualified seniors under the HUD guidelines. We can talk about those a little bit later as we go forward. But we're here to help provide those in-home services, provide in-home mobility and safety across the board. So that's doing things like widening those doorways and installing those wheelchair ramps and changing out flooring so it can accommodate walkers and wheelchairs in the house, putting rails throughout and grab bars throughout the home, remodeling the bathroom, so a whole host of things, and we're really excited to be able to do that here in Centennial. We're also a large, I say a mid-sized probably, housing provider. Pat would know, he sees, and so Chris, they see some of the other organizations that do this, but we have 14 different independent living communities across the Front Range, providing apartments to over 700 households here in the Denver metro area, and we are currently working with communities. You'll know some of the names. We have a partnership right now working on a project with the town of Erie, which is really exciting. It's a community probably not too different from Centennial in terms of got a lot of young, active professional with families, but they also are dealing with, we have some folks who have established that community, and now we're dealing with some of those issues of affordability and housing that Pat mentioned. We're also looking at some similar projects in the city of Aurora, which is kind of new for us. We haven't worked there, but that's comprehensively how we're trying to address it. We also have established a portal now that folks can call across the region with any needs that they have. It's called Colorado Housing Connects. and they can call just a central phone number to learn about resources and communities across the Front Range. So we're working in partnerships with a lot of communities like Centennial, other local governments, other nonprofits, service providers, those folks who can connect seniors with those essential services to help them age in place safely and longer. So we do a lot of things, and again, we're just one of the active partners. You'll hear about more about how we're working cohesively and collaboratively to address some of these issues. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Schaffner. As you may have heard from the introduction, this is about my 12th week in this part of the state. But I haven't traveled very far. I came from Adams County. And so a little bit about my background. I'm a lawyer by training, spent several years in private equity real estate, and then transitioned into affordable housing about 7 years ago. I've been there ever since, and just recently took over the position of Executive Director for South Metro Housing Options. So South Metro Housing Options, formerly Littleton Housing Authority, which may be a name more familiar to some of you. A couple of years ago, they changed the name in the hopes that they could expand their jurisdiction a bit so that they could start to find more innovative and creative partnerships from the private sector, namely, to start to address some of the supply issues that you've heard about so much already today. Currently, we own and manage about 600 units, a little over 600 units of affordable housing. Interestingly enough, for this evening's conversation, about 74% of those units are occupied by seniors. We currently also maintain a wait list of just over 1,000 names waiting to get an opportunity to kind of qualify for housing, and we have about 50% of those names are seniors that we do know now. Sadly, because of the supply issue, many more of them will be seniors by the time they get called off the wait list. So we have several issues from our perspective, and our goal, which is to provide affordable housing in the communities that need it. I think we're going to talk a little bit more later about some of the challenges, more specifically facing all of us in the affordable housing arena. But I think just to give some high-level perspective, there's a lot of, I think, perhaps misconceptions about what affordable housing means in many jurisdictions. When you take into consideration what our current average rents are in the metro area, or down the south side of the metro area, we're all over $1,000. So over $1,000 a month for a 2-bedroom. We currently can find folks that qualify. All folks will qualify. I'm on the record, so let me clarify that. Not all folks will qualify, but from an income perspective, you will qualify for much of our housing if you are a single person earning less than $49,000 a year. So it is perhaps not what you thought affordable housing was. And I think we see seniors, particularly when they're looking at options around assisted living, the average cost of assisted living facilities to be around $3,500 a month in the Denver metro area. We find many folks struggling to have the resources to find solutions to their long-term senior housing needs. So I guess I'm happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. So I'm Missy Griggs. I am the case manager supervisor under the Area Agency on Aging with Dr. Cog, Denver Regional Council of Government. I think most of you have heard of us. And I've been there a year. My background is I worked in adult protection as a supervisor for a number of years in a different community. My program now is under the Older Americans Act, so I only work with those over the age of 60. I provide services to anyone in the community, the 8 big metro area communities that are needing help finding services and support. Our goal is to try to help people stay in their homes, be able to age in place, be safe, be independent, and be healthy. Probably just one of the biggest challenges is we're seeing is at our agency we have an information and assistance line. We get about 400 calls a month. Half of those are from seniors looking for housing. So they are looking for housing that is affordable, something that they are able to maintain in. They're having to move from their homes for a variety of reasons, or maybe they're in a rental and their income has stayed the same because they get a certain amount of Social Security each year, but their rent has doubled. So now they're paying more than half, or more than 70% of their income is actually going towards rent. So that's kind of what we're seeing in ours, and we work closely we do a lot of housing applications, trying to help people figure out where they're going to be and how they're going to do that. We're also seeing a lot of people decide to go on Medicaid, as a way to try to offset that. Okay, I can't get into housing right now, but maybe I could go to assisted living, so I'm gonna get on Medicaid and go into assisted living until I can get affordable housing. That's not a solution, but we're seeing a lot of that. And I know we'll get into all the other stuff in a little bit here. And I'll introduce Linda.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Missy. I'm a client of Missy's, and it came about through a stroke I had in April. 5 years ago, I lost my home, and I lost it through fraudulent means, which is why my last name is not up here. My case is still pending, but I did lose my home. I had my car repossessed. I had 2 of my grandchildren, of whom I am guardian, living with me at the time, and I wanted to stay in the community with the rest of my family and with my children's school intact. I found one place that was called low-income housing, and by low income, they did mean low income. They forgot to add and high rent. Naturally, I qualified. I had very little income. With the help of my family, I was able to secure a security deposit and people to help us move into this apartment complex. The complex itself was substandard in its construction. I had monthly floods from pipes leaking. I had mold. I had no amenities in the apartment whatsoever, a very indifferent staff. It was 2 years of difficult living. However, I could stay in the same community with my family, support my grandchildren, and keep us in the same school system. Into this household came my adult son. He has not been part of the household because of many problems he has, which is why I'm the guardian of his children. I let him into the household to help me with the rent. We recently were asked to leave the apartment complex, which was called low income, because of some of his behavior. And I was very afraid that I wouldn't be accepted anywhere else. I then and have since learned that I'm not embarrassed about having lost my home or my possessions. I'm not alone. I'm not living in a dumpster or eating out of one. I have a roof over my head, and I have food in my refrigerator. I have a relative living with me that is not quite what I prefer, but I need to have his help financially. Another thing I learned, and for any of you out there that may have to experience this horrible situation, you can approach people that are not dedicated to low-income housing or helping others. You can approach them and say, look, I've just lost everything. I don't have good credit, but I don't have a criminal record, and I can prove I have this much income. Will you accept me? That's what happened to me. Today, I'm recovering from my stroke. With the Missy's help, I'm receiving the Medicaid that I need and the transportation I need. It's hard to get somewhere without a car, you may have realized. I'm doing well. I'm in a new location that doesn't have water leaks or mold. And I've come a long way from my foreclosure. Thanks for coming today, and thanks for listening.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you very much for putting a face to that issue. Because you're right, you're not alone, and there are so many that are affected. And hopefully we can get to that in our next question, which is a greater understanding of who is being affected by this and how are they being affected. So the question is, how would you describe the current situation as it relates to both affordable housing and seniors? And whoever wants to take that. So can I also just add, just one of these microphones can be on at a time, we're getting some feedback.
I'll jump in. I think Linda eloquently and very passionately articulated her situation, and she's right. It's all too common that we see seniors approach us living on fixed, limited, very limited incomes with an inability to find quality housing or find stability in their housing situation. And so you can hear firsthand just how the conditions right now are impacting folks across communities like Centennial and elsewhere. I think where we're all here trying to step in and figure out how can we best serve folks like Linda where they are with housing options, trying to strategically work with partners like folks at the state who can help us identify resources to address some of these pressing housing challenges that we face, working with housing providers to see if there are opportunities to create or strategize a way to secure, establish more units that folks can tap into. But it's a very difficult situation right now, I think, facing so many. I'll just editorialize on this a little bit too. I think the recession impacted folks in ways that we still won't know for many, many years, but we can tell you, those of us on the front lines and probably folks like Missy who get the phone calls, that folks are not prepared today for the situations that they're facing with regard to their housing. And so collectively, collaboratively, we need to work together with the municipalities, with folks like nonprofits like mine, with folks at the state, and really try to fix the issue quickly. I think because we're in a crisis situation, but then also practically, what can we reasonably do as a society, with the resources that exist out there to help folks like Linda.
I say this often, and maybe not often enough. So the housing issues are local. It's about your community, and it's about your political will. It starts and it stops there. When it comes to building housing for a cost, the one variable that we have to adjust for from community to community is land cost. It costs what it costs to build. It's about land cost. When it's about land cost, it's about density. If you've noticed I-25 and the various senior properties that are going up in Denver, at Yale, at University of Denver, at the Buckhorn Exchange in downtown, those are senior properties. They are next to light rail, which is critical, and they're 50 units or more. That's when we're looking at not building assisted living or not building nursing homes. It is that affordable product that we're trying to develop close to transportation. But it is. It's certainly always about resources and other types of tools that we have, but it does. It really comes down to if this is going to be a priority for your communities, there are solutions out there that we can bring to the table.
I wanted to just add to that from a different perspective, because I'm a case manager and a social worker, and I'm out in the community with these elder people. You hear me now? Okay. I feel like that phone commercial. Is that what we're seeing is, so you mentioned the housing that's right by the light rail. Well, that's great, except that not a single person that I work with over the age of 60 can afford those places. So what we're seeing is that there's this group of people who, if you're only getting $781, which is the low end of Social Security, and that's what you were getting each month, and a one-bedroom apartment in a iffy place of town is costing you $750 a month. This is what we're seeing, and we're seeing this throughout all the communities. Just about every community I have been in, we are seeing this issue. So we have people who are living with their children, who are now trying to raise their own family, take care of parents, and trying to figure out where they're going to have mom or dad go because they had to move dad out of their apartment that he could afford 5 years ago when he was able to work, supplemented with his Social Security. Well, now he can't work, and his income does not it won't meet his needs. So if, again, if he's only getting $800 a month, just got a call, Arapahoe County, $800 a month, his rent went up to $750. What are these people gonna do? And we are really struggling, especially when most places, I don't know if you're aware of this, have wait lists. And a lot of places, you can't even get on their wait lists anymore. So what do we do for the next 12 months to 24 months when they're waiting to hopefully get into housing? So this is kind of the struggle we're seeing.
What are they doing besides moving in with relatives?
They're homeless. They're out on the street. They are trying to live with a family member or another relative. You heard Linda's situation. She has to have someone live with her who is, in order to be able to stay off the streets, who's not an ideal person to have in her home. So where else they're going, we simply don't know. The shelters are crowded. There's not nice transitional housing for seniors. A lot of nice transitional programs for families, not for seniors.
And I can echo just a few of those and confirm. In fact, we are one of those organizations that have closed our wait lists because they've become so cumbersome and just huge, frankly offering hope that doesn't quite exist in the next 2 years or so. So many of our wait lists are at least reaching a point where we've given notice that we're going to be closing them. We've seen similarly to your earlier point, we see a lot of multi-generational living situations where folks are moving back in with their kids. And I think, the examples that strike me the most are the folks that just frankly didn't see it coming. And I think that's the big key of the conversation today. In preparing for the panel today, I was speaking with a colleague at work, and her father has just recently passed away, and so her mother recognizes that she'd like to downsize. The plan has always been to downsize the home, to just probably get a small apartment near the grandkids and kind of just do it like that. And I think it's becoming frighteningly clear that she's not financially really able to do that. She's going to continue to work a little longer than I think she wanted to, and right now is not able to either keep the home or afford the rent in the apartment. So for her, she is in this period of time where she's moving back in with her daughter, who works with me, to try to figure it out and try to either save some money and strategize and just recalibrate her expectations, because again, I don't think there'd been anything more than just a reasonable expectation that it would work out based on what they had in savings and what they expected housing costs to look like.
You have described the current situation in terms of waiting lists, and literally I know it's across the state that the waiting lists are so long that they literally are just not taking any more names.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue of doubling up and what that means for overcrowding, and then and also just for those that are paying over 50% of their income towards rent, transportation, there isn't that opportunity to raise their economic status. And so this next question is, what does that mean for the state economically? What are the implications of this housing crisis for the state, for communities like Centennial, and for individual families? Can you expand on that?
I'll start by talking about the economics. One thing for, gosh, the last decade, we have been focused on ending homelessness. One of the key metrics that we have been able to identify that applies also to seniors is when someone is utilizing their healthcare system. And in the case of the homeless population, it's also the criminal justice system, it's any number of public systems. Securing housing, stable housing, affordable housing reduces that cost immensely. And we can certainly get into different numbers, but it's to the point that what we are beginning to connect at the national level and at the state level is a connection between the Medicare and Medicaid costs and the eligibility of some of those resources for housing. Because there is that savings that accrues to the taxpayer. So New York City is the first that has actually taken Medicaid dollars, put them into housing for stabilizing that individual, bringing costs down. That is a business model that we've used on the homeless side, that we're starting to use then on people with disabilities as well as seniors. But let me underscore that and maybe get to the point of why we're starting to look at it. In 1995, a study was done by the Wall Street Journal and NBC News that asked the question of what causes poverty? And in 1995, 60% of the people surveyed said, well, that person did something to find themselves in that situation being poverty. That same question was asked this past July in 2014. Why is that person poor? What caused that poverty? That 60% is now 30%. Almost 50% of the people are now answering that question saying, it's a matter of circumstance. It's a matter of health. It's a matter of mental illness. It's a matter of a death of a spouse. It is not that person's fault. And what they went to and what caused a dramatic change in people's attitudes was the 2009 recession. You and I and many of our neighbors were faced with a very difficult situation. Whether it's our house and losing our equity and our stability, whether it's our children and losing jobs, all of a sudden it became very close to us. And it kind of woke some of us up to say, we've got to work on this. And there's the economic side, and there's the political side, and there is the priority side, because with little resources, if you only have little resources, it's not about creating more resources, it's about what are your priorities and where are you going to spend those limited resources to get the biggest bang for your investment. So when we talk economics, we talk, and I serve the taxpayers, when we look at tax dollars, and that's where we go for answers.
I think when we look at it from economic perspective, as Pat mentioned, a lot of these issues now are compounding the demands on the safety net. And I know from our perspective, when we go into a home, we will see seniors living in some tough, dire conditions. The house can be in a great community here in Centennial or similar communities, and you have no clue how bad that situation is in that home until you go in, and then that opens the door to have a conversation with that homeowner about what other needs they may have. Not addressing the issue, not prioritizing this issue will compel the need to focus on those back-end safety net issues. It's going to impact our healthcare system. It's going to impact food banks. It's going to impact social services because folks are not going to be equipped to address these as a family, as a household. We're seeing more and more of that. Our wait lists are closed at the moment as well. And even the folks that we have in there living on fixed incomes, and again, remember, they have to qualify to live there, and they pay a portion of adjusted gross income, 30% of their adjusted gross income. And even there, folks are having a difficult time because they have no resources. They have no backstop to their own budgets to equip them to live as long as folks are living today. And even there now, we're looking at bringing in more and more social services just to help them because we have to. Otherwise, where are they going to end up? What are they going to do? They're going to have a roof on their head, but all these other needs go unmet. So bottom line, economically, that's what we're going to face. Just bigger challenges that are going to cost all of us a lot more and certainly impact society in ways that we can't foretell just yet.
Just to tack onto that also, as I see for a housing authority, what a lot of these changes mean and what the change in demographics mean for us is that our role is probably going to continue to evolve as we are at this intersection between housing and services being so important, so critically entwined. Historically, I think that what folks have understood housing authorities to be and what we kind of identify ourselves to be now, we see that changing quite a bit. And if our mission is, in fact, to continue to provide as much affordable housing as we can to those who need it, we're going to reach a point of just, more inventory where we have limitations we can't control. And frankly, keeping folks in their current living situation may be their most affordable option if they can physically do that. And so that's when our opportunities to strengthen our role within a service network, similar to what Brothers does, to keep folks living there. What do we need to change in that household to help them stay where they are? Great organizations like InnovAge is one of those groups that does that identifies these kind of seemingly small needs that can transform kind of the plan for folks, whether it's small housekeeping or cooking or laundry, simple things that allow folks to age in place. I think our role as a housing authority will start to evolve into those kinds of channels as this need just becomes too great for any one organization or portion of the organization to fill.
Got to push the button. You may have noticed I'm wearing a pen, 1 and 4. Does anybody have any idea what that might mean? Yeah.
Just a guess in terms of where we're headed in terms of
1 in 4 adults are going to hit 65 in 2035 in Colorado. That's higher than the United States average, which is going to be 1 in 5. That's 25% of our population is going to be 65 and older. And when that happens, we are going to see a huge shift because that's going to impact healthcare. It's going to impact your tax bases. It's going to impact your education, your transportation, your housing. It is going to impact all of those things. So just like we were talking about, not only do individuals need to be thinking about what's my future going to look like. I think we all kind of go along with, well, I'm going to retire and I'm going to have a place and all's going to be well. That's what I'm doing. But then that one thing happens. Your spouse dies. Well, now suddenly you have half the income you had. How are you going to pay your mortgage? Their entire income paid your mortgage. Your income's not going to cover that, let alone the rest of your needs. So really looking at what's your plan A, what's your plan B, and communities need to do that as well. They need to be starting to looking forward that our population is going to increase in age dramatically in the next 20 years, and it's going to impact each community differently. And you really need to start looking at that and how that's going to look.
I just want to let the audience know that we're going to be moving into the Q&A portion from audience members. So if you do have a question and want to pose that, if you'll just make sure that either Greg or Tom get that. The last moderated question, and it's probably one of the most important parts, and I know also that you're in your closing, you're going to be making some recommendations. But just looking at the problems, what do you see as strategies that have been tried, that have worked, and things that have been tried that haven't worked? Both from an individual standpoint and individual agency standpoint, and maybe looking at other states or other districts. I know that I am supporting my parents, and at the same time, planning for college for my kids. And I know I'm not alone. So this issue it really does impact every single generation, and I think ultimately we want to look at what are some potentials in terms of solutions.
Well, I can begin. It's a big, I know you put this part on the agenda. This is kind of a big question, so I don't have a whole lot of, I don't think really brand new ideas, but what I thought I'd like to do is share some, just very, very briefly, some concepts that are working or we see being tested in other states and other cities. It requires obviously a pretty creative, out-of-the-box series of thoughts to kind of come up with solutions when we understand that frankly for us and developers, accessing the capital is the biggest problem for us. So we've got to find the funds to make the development happen. Then if we're going to be running a development at reduced rates, we need to find ways to pay for the operations because that's, it's a very simple business model. The rents pay for the costs. And then I guess also finding a way to fund those supportive services. Hiring a staff person to kind of provide transportation and accessing all the other solutions that they need is very difficult. What I've seen in other cities start to surface as test models, shared housing as an idea, which includes matching. So folks who don't necessarily know each other but find themselves in similar situations. It's been a long time since many of these folks have had roommates, but they're finding this to be a reasonable solution in some areas. And also cooperative housing and kind of group home housing, where you get 4 or more, 2 or more, frankly, folks that decide to live together, share expenses, and a house. One of the kind of more creative and fairly progressive ideas that people I've seen discussed and implemented in some larger cities has been, incorporating formerly homeless seniors into a mixed development with other seniors who perhaps don't meet that demographic. So what you would, kind of similar to what you would see as a traditional mixed income development, this is a development that has all seniors, but some of them come from a homeless situation in their background. And why that part is critical is because introducing that kind of a demographic into the development allows developers to access different amounts of capital infusions and private investment. So I don't know, I haven't spoken firsthand with anyone who kind of went through that development and how that's thriving today. But I think it speaks a little bit to kind of how creative we have to get and perhaps reevaluate how comfortable we are in creating solutions with what may or may not be the most traditional kind of situation.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Chris mentioned. Access to capital is key, and I do give the state a lot of credit and other public housing financiers, financial institutions, a lot of credit for helping to figure out some other types of products, loan products, just products that make a project go and profitable, for lack of a better term. But as Chris mentioned, they have to work on paper. And so I think that's key. And so working with our legislators and local elected officials to find some of those resources to make solutions available and possible at the local level. I guess what I also say, we know what is challenging, particularly at the nonprofit level, because we had struggled with this for so long. What's not going to work is if we go it alone. We can only help so many people if we go it alone, and after a while it wears on you if you can't help somebody the way that they need to be helped. So what we've tried to do is really break the frame as an institution and not be insular, but to reach out to other organizations and say, well, how can we provide complementary services to assist one another in serving those folks who have this huge need. And I think regionally, that's also how we're going to have to approach this challenge moving forward. It's not just going to be Centennial and other communities working in isolation, but talking to one another, asking about those best practices, looking at what works in other communities, what's effective, and then going to folks at the Division of Housing and in the legislature and saying, hey, this is what's working. How can we find a regional solution, a regional strategy to employ some of these tactics and start to, make a difference in communities facing the issues?
So the first step is to have this meeting. Thanks for actually the invitation. This is the 6th town hall meeting on senior housing I've been at in the last 2 months. So I've been to Aurora and I've been to Arvada. We've done some more in Jeffco and Denver, and it is an issue that is at the forefront of an awful lot of people's conversations. Secondly, learn that the housing that we are trying to develop is not solved by the private marketplace. A lot of people think it is. If we build enough, the rents will go down and everybody can afford it. It sometimes works like that, but if you build enough and the rents go down, what happens is you have buildings that fall into disrepair. There's this cost of rent. There's a rent. There is a cost of operating and owning that building that you need to maintain. That's about $600 a month right now. So if you're earning on SSDI or SSI $741, you're going to be in substandard housing. So that's what the cost is, and I'm sorry, but that's what the cost is. So it's a matter of supply, and it is a matter of getting this understanding in each of our communities of what it's going to take. Ultimately, if we don't do it, it's going to cost us more in terms of the safety net, the health care, and the like. It is going to take a huge adjustment, if not, on the part of our families. So I think that has to be understood as well. And then thirdly, what can be immediately done? Again, I always go, it's a local issue, and where the state and the federal government and other governments are there to really help you along this process. It's got to be sites, it's got to be land, it has to be buildings. I mean, that's what it comes down to, is from a start and how you increase the supply. And so setting the groundwork, setting that first step is what we need communities to begin doing.
So I have a couple of questions, several questions from the audience, and we have about 30 minutes, so I'll try to get through as many as we can. One of the questions is about developers, though, and what's the developer's role in solving this? So can developers ask to provide senior housing as a package of larger developments? And then also, how about can there be some requirements in terms of accessibility and making sure that whatever new developments go in, that there are some requirements about that? So if someone can answer the question on that role that developers can play in solving this.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, yes, I think those are great suggestions. That goes back to Pat's earlier comment regarding political will, and I think if it's recognized as a need and a value, I think that absolutely that's the case. Some jurisdictions, quite commonly you'll see them identify priorities for development. So when a developer comes to the city, there are negotiating items like tap fees and some of the pre-development costs. Really, basically, the city's way to communicate to developers that we want this to be a developer-friendly place. Here are our priorities, and if you're coming to do this, we want to be a good partner to you. I think I think that varies by jurisdiction, quite frankly, how flexible policymakers are interested in being. And I think at this point, we're reaching a point where the data is so compelling frankly, how familiar they are with the need, because the need is so compelling on its face that I think that these are great suggestions. There's another opportunity through the state low-income housing tax credit process that I think you may know as CHAFA. It's a competitive grant that allows private investors to partner with nonprofits and housing authorities to develop low-income housing. Traditionally, because it's a competitive grant, one of the things the state has done is that they've prioritized senior housing as one of the kind of key point captures to be awarded the grant. I think that's important, but that's a way for private developers to kind of realize tax benefits for over the course of 15 years, kind of almost dollar for dollar for their investment in the project. And that capital infusion allows the operators to operate at a lower rents. So that's a program that's been around for a while. It's about as simple as I can make it because it's mind-numbingly complicated. But I think those are great suggestions and great conversations to have with City Council.
A question about funding came up. And so if each of the primary organizations can just identify your funding sources, is it federal, is it state? Are you getting some block grants, that sort of thing? Just quickly.
Sure.
All of the above. Majority of our funding comes either federal dollars somehow either funneled in through communities, working in partnership with the state. But the majority of those funds do come from the feds. We do work with a lot of private foundations. Interestingly enough, foundations and even the health foundations now, I think, are more attuned to the convergence of some of these. So I think there's some intriguing partners moving forward. And of course, working with volunteers and individuals who also want to contribute to programming, because they all understand that it's a community issue.
Primarily federal funding, but as I just mentioned, we do have a couple of projects, and we're beginning our relationships with the private sector. So we just closed our most recent tax credit funding. It's in partnership. So all that funding has been commented as a tax exchange for private investor.
So, luckily, and I say that because we have funding sources from state and federal and actually private now, where the availability of what's called Section 8 rental vouchers is flat. It's been flat for 10 years. We receive about $42 million for the vouchers we have. 78% of those vouchers go to people with disabilities. So when you talk about money, it's great, but, and I just went through this yesterday with the state legislature, and the budget committee already starts meeting. If the state is going to invest in dollars, it's got to be the greatest return on that investment. When you have taxpayer dollars, not investment dollars, when you're investing taxpayer dollars, it's got to have the greatest return on investment. And that's what we can begin to demonstrate. That's what they're asking, and that's what we're demonstrating to them. People with disabilities, seniors, people with high needs are where the resources are going to go. I'll just say one other thing that we have, so that things come around. We received about $41 million to put into affordable housing from what was at that point, it's called the National Mortgage Settlement. Many of you are well aware of the legal action taken against some major lenders and mortgage companies. It's a national settlement. Colorado, and the Attorney General made it a point to invest those dollars in affordable housing. And we're starting to seeing the fruits of those investments today. It's an investment of around $41 million in private dollars, which is a huge benefit to all of our programs. So I just wanted to make sure I underscore that.
Dr. Cogdis has, I know, federal and state grants that we receive. That's about all I know.
And is there good coordination between the agencies in terms of working together to solve this?
I'll let somebody else answer that.
From my perspective, it's getting better. I think it's existed, but now I think folks are just working more collaboratively. I think, again, approaching this from a regional level. Last week, you made a presentation to the Metro Mayor's Caucus around similar issues and concerns. And folks are understanding the need to resource this, big and small, and I think that situation's improving across Colorado right now.
So one of the questions is, I know, Chris, you talked about communal living and you talked about sharing. I was thinking ride sharing. Now we're going to have home sharing.
Yeah.
And before we go to this question, can someone identify for us what the requirements are to be able to qualify for low-income housing?
Sure, that's a great question. So there's, I guess, when we're talking about seniors, that age limit is defined at 62. Now keep in mind that you aren't required, so we have a portion of our portfolio that is really dedicated to senior and disabled, and then we have a portion of the portfolio of housing that is unrestricted by age. All of them you'll find the same income restrictions. And so the way HUD looks at it, different housing options for us, it's measured according to area median income. So if you're at 80% area median income, you're recognized as needing a little less help than someone at 30% area median income, if that scale makes a little sense. So for us, for the most part, most of our housing is at the 80% or below. And that 80%, I brought it here, is around $43,000 a year in annual adjusted income for one person. Household of two doesn't tick up too much from there, $49,000, all the way up to a family of four making $61,000 a year. And so from an income perspective, which I think is kind of the key, that's what we're talking about. And then the other qualifications that come into that are kind of what kind of household size and bedrooms you get and all that kind of stuff. And it's pretty strict. A family of three would qualify for a one bedroom, as long as it's HUD recognizes it as 2+1, two folks in the bedroom, and then somebody can be on the couch. So it gets pretty less than ideal for families, I can say. But from an income perspective, that's what you're looking at. And when we see seniors in particular on fixed income, they nearly all qualify.
They nearly all qualify. Do you see those requirements changing, being increased, being reduced? And the things that you talked about in terms of communal living and sharing, do you see that as an alternative from a systems standpoint?
I think yes. I think it's a creative option, and I think in terms of the communal living and the house sharing, I think it's great. I don't necessarily even think that would be a model that we would be involved in, or necessarily any sort of government funding would be involved in. I think what's interesting about that is in the context of kind of everything you see happening in business and kind of the economy right now, this move to a peer-to-peer kind of economy where somebody just needs to put them together and you can find someone to run errands for you can find Uber to pick you up, and everything's kind of, if you can get people to kind of connect with each other, they can figure this stuff out on their own. They can pool their incomes and they can find, not to say that they don't need us to play a role in that or housing kind of connectors to, but I think it can be great. I think it could be really great. I mean, I've had this conversation with my parents too, and I joke that statistically my dad's gonna die first, so I always tell him it's only a matter of time, and so then I'll be make sure that mom's taken care of, so I don't have to do all the work. And we laugh because she's got a couple of friends together that she thinks living Golden Girl style would be awesome. She thinks that would be great. So I think if we're willing to be creative, and not everybody has different kind of financially what they're going to be able to kind of provide for themselves. And so what I provide is for a small segment of the market, but I think historically what we're finding is that it's a much larger segment that would qualify to receive services and support from an organization like mine. So qualifying, I don't see them changing, I guess, to answer your other question. If anything, hopefully they'll go up to accommodate inflation, and we'll find that the same amount of people continue to qualify, and perhaps even more, depending on what Social Security kind of can be relied upon.
I know at Dr. Cog, the case managers have had conversations about kind of that communal living, trying to really be creative about how can we kind of hook up these people together to maybe look at whether they could be in a situation where maybe they had a roommate or had a couple of roommates, and that might be something that would work for them. Logistically, though, because of privacy laws, it's a little hard, but it is something that we have been talking about, because we're going to have to start getting really creative, so we can get people out of their cars, off people's couches, and in stable housing.
I don't think you have to go very far to find good examples. So at 52nd and Federal, anybody know Mary Crest campus?
Yes.
Have you watched its redevelopment?
Yes.
And the core of that is a 4-acre urban garden. Services are connected across Federal to the Regis Nursing School. And as that builds out with families and condos and affordable senior rental, and there's a real connection there to the community. Seniors don't like to live with families, I'm told. I don't know if I want to live with kids. I get, it's a question. You have to think when you build out. It's a market question. Am I going to suffer from a lease-up problem if I don't find a lot of comers? So, but if you go to Loveland, and if you see what the Loveland Housing Authority has recently done, and I recommend any book by Bill Thomas, Dr. Bill Thomas. Anybody know Bill Thomas? The one I'm reading now is called Second Wind. I'm hoping for mine soon. We have just dedicated what's called the greenhouses. It's a concept that he has introduced up in Loveland. And it could be assisted living, it could be nursing care, skilled nursing care, but it's intertwined with a lot of independent senior living on a campus, a 10-acre campus. But the idea, and it is really a personalization of housing and of care. And I'll leave it at that. We could talk about it, but it really does take us to a challenge to redefine what we see and what we think housing for our next generation is going to look like.
I've got a question on zoning, and I'm just wondering if you know of any other cities around the state that are doing things creatively around zoning to address this.
I don't know.
I could just talk about a couple of the developments we're involved with right now. Again, I mentioned the town of Erie that has just really opened the doors and has, really worked closely with us and led the way. I mean, we have, they gave us a site. They had a project there. There's a 12-unit community serving seniors that they want to expand, but they have, their zoning and their code, and we talked to them about it, and we're still exploring what this is going to look like. But by their own, charter and how the laws are on the books, we're going to have to go in there and ask for some variance. But they're taking the lead on addressing some of those. There's some, height restrictions, that sort of thing, just some density. But they've said, no, this is something that we want to pursue, and we're going to help you get this done. Similarly, there's a nearby community, larger community, but they're also approaching it from the standpoint of saying, hey, we want to improve the area, and so we're going to look at this a little differently than what we have written on the books right now. It is going to be more dense, and it is going to be a little bit more urban, but we acknowledge that this is something that we want to see in our community because there is such a great need. So I think from that standpoint, communities can take the lead by working with their city staff, their town staff, to kind of facilitate that process. And that's where I think the rubber meets the road is when you come and you have to take those to the legal side and then take it to council.
The city of Centennial is landlocked, and so we're limited in terms of possibilities. Are you seeing other cities creatively repurposing that sort of?
Well, Denver's landlocked. Most of the metro area. I think Aurora's not landlocked. What did I read in the paper today? They're going out to Kansas. Anybody from Aurora? Sorry. Okay. Two things you got to work for in zoning. One is a bonus If you do what, you're gonna build senior housing, you get a bonus on top of, so you can build 4 more units instead of the 10 you said. That's one aspect. Not many Colorado communities are doing it. But what Denver did was along their Main Street zoning, next to your transit corridors, they flipped their parking requirements.
Yes.
So no longer are you required to have 1.5 slots per unit. It's now, for every 4 units, you have 1 parking spot. Anybody know how much parking costs to build?
10,000 for space.
40 grand a space.
So if it's in the ground, it's between $22,000 and $25,000 a slot. A space. So take that out of the equation, and it makes a big difference.
Also, really quickly, just to add, also keep in mind that this land that we're talking about asking for variances on, if it's going to be truly meeting the needs of the seniors that we're hoping to kind of accommodate, it's going to be in prime locations, right? So it's going to be land that creates a walkable life for them, access to services, not out in the middle of nowhere where it's, in the middle of a field somewhere. So, I think understandably we'll see resistance to getting those height variances and density variances, because this is stuff that's downtown, kind of part of the urban core where it's very, very valuable land.
It's interesting how you saw that. So this is a question from the audience that doesn't quite fit in the affordability category, but we've seen that as we've recovered from the recession and the housing market has come back, that competition for housing is driving up costs. And someone touched on that issue of seniors that are wanting to downsize are finding that there aren't any options. And as they're not able to downsize, then people aren't able to access that supply. So do you see that as getting better? Do you see that as getting worse? And what is, from a policy standpoint, is there anything that can be done to address that?
So by 2035, we're really going to be old, but by 2020, we're going to be old too.
Yeah.
The East Coast is ahead of us in the type of buildings they have. Most of our buildings are built for when we were 30 and 40 years old. So that's when our housing stock was built, and it continues, but yet it's not keeping up with now this huge doubling of demand for properties that aren't single-family homes and stairs and everything else. So we really do have to shift. So when you downsize, you're downsizing into, single floor apartment, and it's not there. It's really getting hard. So we've got to make that shift. And there was another part of that question, but it's a physical product that we don't have enough of. There's a question back there, maybe a follow-up to that.
In Aurora, we're having the same problem because we have like 1.1% vacancies,
Yeah.
especially in the northern part of the city. And that's the problem. We don't have any inventory of housing.
Yeah.
Developers bought up some of them, they're charging higher and higher rents. We're getting more and more families that are now homeless
Yeah.
as compared to just somebody off the street singly.
The other part of this, and I hope you all know what we did to ourselves in 1986. So we changed our tax code, right? And so how many people in this room used to write off the interest rate on their credit cards? Everybody was eligible, right? Today, we've stopped that, and we put it on our house. So now, we take out a second mortgage to buy the vacation, and buy the car, and buy the second home, and buy the education. So we took that consumerism, and we put it on our nest egg. So when you do downsize, you gotta address that issue first. And it's a ticking time bomb with our consumer mentality, did we put it on our house, and how much equity is actually left? And when those value of homes come back down, which they will, or they'll flatten out, then there's going to be another question we ask ourselves. Can we now downsize? It's our housing ATM story. We turned our housing into ATMs. It's not good.
And I guess the big question that I'm left with is recognizing that we have a growing population of seniors and a housing supply that doesn't meet those needs, either in terms of pricing and in terms of accessibility. How do you create incentives for both the private market, and how do you adapt in terms of federal and state funding to begin to address that? And so I'm going to wrap up here and have everyone just finish with their final thoughts. There were a couple of questions that really also got at that, and that's, what is the focus that the city of Centennial should be looking at in terms of moving forward, and just what are the opportunities that the city can capitalize in terms of solving some of these challenges. So final thoughts and a wrap up.
Oh, look at the woman. Well, as you can probably tell, I'm not a politician. I'm a social worker. And I don't know. I see that every day. I really don't know what the solution is, other than I think that communities have got to start having the conversation. I've been to a lot of meetings where people were just shocked that maybe their neighbor who had a beautiful home was actually living in filth because they couldn't take care of it anymore. But on the outside, the house looks okay. Just really starting to recognize that you're going to have this and you're going to have this in your community, and really start having those conversations with the policymakers on how you're going to start addressing it, and really looking at it now and not in 2020 or 2035 when suddenly now it's a huge issue.
I guess these are kind of closing thoughts, I think.
Yep,
right?
they're
Yeah,
closing
good.
thoughts.
So I guess first I would say thank you for everybody that's here today, because I think, personally speaking, I think one of the takeaways for today is hopefully making sure that we're all a little bit closer to recognizing that this is a problem that really everyone should be thinking about, even if our particular senior or our housing plan is under control. I think, we've got, every city is going to be managing different particular impacts to this changing demographic. And I don't have the numbers right now in front of me. Dr. Cog did the study. This showed how every city is going to be impacted differently.
Yeah.
Some communities are going to get older than others in this 2030 benchmark. And so you've got to be ready for that. And I think without that data, my kind of call to action would be to pay attention to it and to understand that the community as a whole will suffer if these plans are not in place for all the folks. It's not, the housing authority's job to do all of it. It's the housing authority's job to do it the most cost-effective way to serve as many folks as they can, and understand that our role is probably going to be evolving to meet this kind of, what did I hear it called? The silver tsunami. I don't know. But yeah.
Yes, silver tsunami.
Yeah. So that's our job, and I think some of the kind of discussion we had around speaking with your city council folks and asking what you can do to help, or how creative are they willing to be on preparing for this, is going to be the decision for every municipality to make, but certainly not one that anyone's going to be able to ignore.
I would suggest to everybody, and I think Chris we talked about this briefly, prepare. Everybody in this room, young and old, prepare for this, because you're going to know somebody who's going to be going through this, whether it's a parent, it's yourself, very, very soon. And so it's important to educate yourself about the options that are available, the challenges that folks are facing. This is something that I think everybody goes through, and there's not a lot new under the sun. I mean, we're talking about very common challenges that folks are going to face. So do everything you can to educate yourself, because you're going to be there soon enough. For service agencies, nonprofits like ours, I think start to think about working collaboratively. You can't solve this on your own. Get out of the funding silo. You need assistance to be able to succeed. Pick your niche, but have it be complementary or offer that niche to another organization that offers complementary services. It is going to take a community and communities across the state to help us address this challenge. And then finally, for communities, engage and plan. Have those conversations with those developers, with those entities that you want to have help or assistance in addressing this issue, and then start to plan. I think it really will take that formalization, because it's going to be up to those communities who are going to have the clout and credibility then to engage the folks at the state level, at the federal level, to open those resources, open that treasury to be able to help address some of these most pressing housing challenges that we're all facing right now.
Well, if you're talking about what your community can do, it's learn about the challenge. If it's your community in a sense of political leadership or in administrative steps you can take at the county or city level, you want to share the risk. So this is a risky business. We work both with private for-profit developers, and we work with nonprofit, and we work with units of government, a housing authority. But in each case, it is a risk. It is private investment that goes into these housing. So you want to set the table. Your local government sets the table. And they set the table lots of different ways. The quickest, the easiest is dealing with the first issue is no one wants this anywhere near them. Whew. So you got to think through what that looks like. And once you do, you have to have that conversation with your community to say this is a priority. The easiest, the quickest way, and I cut to the chase, you buy your land, you figure out what you want there, you work through the zoning, that's taking risk out, even if you have your community meetings to say, what do you want it to look like? Because a lot of the resistance comes from fear, and it comes from not knowing. So you do that conversation, and this is where everybody really hates me, on this side of the table. You have a competition. You go, okay, developers, who can build what we want to build for the lowest cost? But you're taking the risk out. The money will follow. The financing will follow that path. So that's what you do.
Are you talking about having the councils charging their planning departments to plan for this?
Did I say that?
Linda, do you have any final thoughts?
Just what happened to me can happen to anybody. 5 years ago, I was ordering off the left side of the menu. It happened quickly. It happened without much warning. And I got through it without much help. If there's anything I can say to help you prepare, I have no clue what it was. I was struck blindsided. The people that I've reached out to have helped. These organizations especially. I wasn't planning on being a stroke victim. That came as another gift on the side. And lastly, being poor is very, very expensive. Thank you.
I know that the Senior Commission has some gifts for our panelists, so if you'll come on up and give those, we want to thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to our Centennial Mayor, Kathy Noon, for a closing. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone, and I just want to say thank you so much for your attendance. Thank you so much to our panelists, especially to Linda for being able to put a face to it and to have us understand how quickly circumstances can change. And in Centennial, we've been pretty fortunate with a fairly high standard of living, but I think what we're realizing is as we age and as circumstances changed with the recent economic downturn, it can happen to any of us, and we do want to be prepared. I'd just like to brag a little bit that I do believe Centennial is working to be prepared. Number one, City Council authorized the Senior Commission and tasked them with going out and finding out what we had, what we don't have, what we need, and to listen to the seniors in our community. And they've done that, and that's one of the reasons you're here today. City Council has had presentations on the aging demographics, what to expect. We're taping this today in hopes that staff or other members of council that couldn't be here will be able to share. I'd like to introduce two that could. Kathy Turley and Mark Gatto are here from the City Council. And, oh, and Ms. Pico's back there. Sorry, Stephanie, didn't see you come in. So we have 4 of us of our 9 that are here. Many of us have day jobs, so not everybody can be here, but that's another reason that we're taping this, so that we can share this message, share this important information, because it's an opportunity that we don't get to do all the time. So we really do have a plan moving forward. Our boomer bond, our CASOA assessment, that will give us data, that will give us concrete information. It's often difficult for councils to take action with taxpayer monies without good data. So we can all hear personal stories, but we need a little bit more. We need to be able to have that data. What is it people want? So that's another reason that we've allotted the money to go out and do these other assessments. So there's a lot of information gathering going on, and probably in 2016, the City Council and our planning staff will be looking at redoing our comprehensive plan, which is sort of the larger map of what goes on and the goals that the city has. I would anticipate that'll be a large public involvement. We certainly hope that the seniors will be part of that dialogue. So I really do want to thank all of you for being here today. I think that there's an important message that I hope you will take out to the rest of your network and be able to share that. I also want to thank Linda Haley, who is with Arapahoe County Senior Community Services, for everything she does on behalf of our seniors, because I know when we all have an issue, unfortunately, we call Linda and expect Linda to make miraculous things happen. I am on Dr.
Is my issue.
Yeah, and housing is her issue. I'm also a member of the Dr. Cog Aging Advisory Committee. So I've been down at Dr. Cog since, I believe, 2006, long before being mayor. So I sit on the funding committees and different things where the dollars come from. And we've been talking about this quite a bit. Interestingly enough, up until a year ago, information and referral was our #1 issue. It went from transportation and meals, nutrition, then it was information referral, and literally, not even a year, it's now housing. It's become a crisis overnight. So we're all, reacting, and at the same time trying to be proactive. So you are part of that solution just by being here today, and I really want to thank you for your time, and especially for your time and sharing your message. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.